The Dubai heat hit me like a physical wall when I stepped out of the air-conditioned gallery. August afternoon, the kind that made tourists question their life choices, and I was late opening because I had spent the morning arguing with suppliers about shipping costs for the sculpture exhibition. The basket sat beside the gallery entrance, tucked against the ornate wooden door like someone had placed it there with care rather than desperation. I almost walked past it, almost convinced myself it was decorative, something left by the interior designer who kept threatening to update my traditional Arabic aesthetic with modern minimalism. Then I heard the sound, a small whimper that made my stomach drop before my brain caught up to what I was seeing. A baby. Maybe 4 months old, wrapped in fabric so fine it shimmered even in the harsh sunlight, white cotton embroidered with gold thread in patterns I recognized as expensive, even to my untrained eye. He was not crying, which felt wrong. Babies abandoned in baskets outside art galleries in the scorching heat should be screaming. His lips looked dry and his skin had that flush that spoke of too much warmth, and I grabbed the basket and rushed inside so fast I nearly dropped my keys. The gallery interior was blessedly cool, and I set the basket on my desk and carefully unwrapped the outer layer of fabric, checking for injuries or explanations. That was when I found the card. It was tucked against his chest, heavy cream stock with elegant Arabic calligraphy that made my breath catch, because I recognized the style from invitations to events I could never afford to attend. Rashid Al-Mansouri, Desert Heights Tower, penthouse, before sunset. Nothing else, no explanation, no plea, just a name I knew from business journals and society pages, a location that represented more wealth than I would see in 10 lifetimes, and a deadline. The card smelled faintly of jasmine and something metallic that I realized with horror was blood, a dark smudge near the bottom edge like someone had touched it with injured fingers. I looked at the baby, who stared at me with enormous brown eyes that seemed far too knowing, and whispered that we were in trouble. He made a small sound that might have been agreement, and I felt my careful, quiet life beginning to crack apart. What I should have done was call the authorities, report the abandoned infant, hand him over to people trained for this situation, return to my gallery and the safety of predictable days. Instead, I found myself Googling what 4-month-olds needed while the baby watched me from the basket, and then I was locking the gallery and carrying him 3 blocks to the pharmacy where I bought formula and diapers and received knowing smiles from the clerk who assumed he was my nephew. Back in my apartment above the gallery, I fed him formula he took hungrily, changed his diaper with fumbling inexperience, and then sat at my laptop with him sleeping in a nest of cushions beside me. I typed Rashid Al-Mansouri into the search bar and watched my screen fill with exactly what I feared. Real estate empires spanning 3 countries, hotels, commercial properties, luxury developments that reshaped skylines. Net worth estimated in the billions, though exact figures remained private. And buried deeper in the search results, whispers of connections that made my hands shake. Business dealings with families known for ruthlessness. Territorial disputes over development rights that ended in mysterious fires and sudden bankruptcies, the kind of power that operated in spaces where law bent like heated glass. But there were other stories too. Charitable foundations building schools in remote areas, hospitals funded through anonymous donations later traced to his accounts, workers who spoke of fair wages and unexpected generosity. It painted a contradictory picture that I could not reconcile. This man who built empires and destroyed rivals, but also lifted communities from poverty. I heard footsteps on the stairs and froze. My assistant Layla's voice called up, asking why the gallery was closed because we had an appointment scheduled with a collector. I met her at the door, blocking her view inside, and told her I had a family emergency and needed her to handle the meeting. She looked at my face and agreed without argument, but I saw the questions in her eyes. After she left, I studied the card again, turning it over in my hands. The blood smear had dried to rust brown, and I wondered who had written this with injured fingers, who had chosen my gallery specifically, and why. I checked the basket more carefully and found it tucked into the lining, a second note on plain paper in different handwriting. His name is Kareem. Protect him from Fareed. My hands started shaking and did not stop for a long time. The afternoon crawled past while I tried to convince myself that waiting until sunset was reasonable, that I needed time to think, but I knew I was only delaying because fear had wrapped around my throat like fingers. This baby had a father, and whatever else Rashid al-Mansouri might be, that note had been written by someone who believed he deserved his son. At 5 o'clock, I bundled Kareem in clean fabric I had bought, tucked both notes into my purse, and ordered a car service. The driver gave me a strange look when I provided the Desert Heights address but said nothing, and I watched Dubai transform through the window as we drove, familiar neighborhoods giving way to the gleaming excess of new development where buildings competed to touch the sky. Desert Heights Tower rose like a glass and steel declaration of wealth, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that caught the lowering sun and threw it back in blinding sheets. The lobby was marble and gold, with security that made airport screening look casual, and I approached the desk with my heart hammering against my ribs. I told the guard I needed to see Rashid al-Mansouri, that I had something belonging to him. He studied me with professional skepticism until I shifted Kareem in my arms and he saw the baby. His expression changed completely, and he spoke rapidly into a phone in Arabic, too quick for me to follow. Within 3 minutes, the elevator opened and a man stepped out who radiated controlled danger in an expensive suit. He introduced himself as Omar, head of Mr. al-Mansouri's security, and his eyes went wide when he saw Kareem. He asked where I found him, and I explained about the basket and the card while he listened with absolute focus. Omar made a phone call, and the penthouse elevator opened. Rashid al-Mansouri stepped out. He was taller than his photographs suggested, with sharp features and dark eyes that assessed me in seconds before moving to Kareem. And then, everything in his expression cracked open. Shock and something raw and devastating flashed across his face before control slammed back like a mask, but I had seen it, that moment of absolute vulnerability. He moved toward me slowly, each step careful, and when he reached us, his hands came up to take Kareem with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so clearly powerful. He held the baby carefully, supporting his head with practiced ease that surprised me, and studied his face with an intensity that made my chest tight. Kareem stared at him with those knowing brown eyes, and I watched recognition pass between them, something fundamental that needed no words. Rashid's jaw clenched, and when he finally looked at me, his expression was raw in a way that made me want to look away. He asked where I found him in Arabic, then switched to English when he registered my uncertainty, and his voice was rough like broken glass. I told him everything about the basket outside my gallery, the blood-stained card, the second note about protecting Kareem from Farid. With each word, his face grew harder, colder, until I was looking at something carved from stone and fury. He turned to Omar and issued orders in rapid Arabic that I caught pieces of. Find who left the child. Increase security on all properties. Find Farid Kassab now. Omar disappeared immediately, and I took a step backward, thinking I could leave now that I had done what the note demanded. Rashid's hand caught my wrist, not hard, but immovable. He said we needed to talk, and I was not leaving yet. I tried to pull free and told him I had done what I came to do. Kareem was his now, and I wanted nothing more to do with this. He studied me while holding his son, and then asked if I understood what it meant that someone left Kareem at my gallery specifically. I did not answer because I did not want to hear it. He explained with terrible patience that whoever left his son knew where I lived and worked, knew my face, had chosen me deliberately, and if Farid Kassab was involved, then I was already a target. The words hit like cold water, and I felt my normal life crumbling. I said I wanted no part of this world. He responded that the choice was made for me when someone left Kareem on my doorstep, and now the only question was whether I accepted his protection or tried to survive alone. He would not debate this, not with his son's life at stake and mine connected to it. I looked at Kareem sleeping against his father's shoulder and realized my normal life had just ended. The drive to Rashid's estate took an hour through streets that grew progressively emptier and more exclusive, the city lights fading as we climbed into hills dotted with compounds hidden behind high walls. Rashid sat beside me in the back of the SUV with Kareem against his chest, and I pressed myself against the opposite door, trying to process what was happening. The estate appeared beyond gates that opened automatically, revealing a property that balanced traditional Arabic architecture with modern luxury, all white stone and carved screens and gardens that must have cost a fortune to maintain in this climate. Security was everywhere, and I felt the weight of entering a fortress. Rashid led me inside through cool marble corridors to a guest suite that was larger than my entire apartment. He told me I would stay here, that guards would be posted for my protection, and his voice carried that authority that made refusal seem impossible. I asked if I was a prisoner, and he said I was protected, which felt identical. An hour later, Omar returned with information delivered in Arabic that made Rashid's expression turn to ice. After Omar left, Rashid explained in careful English that Farid Kassab had been his business rival for years, territorial disputes over development rights that had turned violent, but using his secret son as leverage was new. I asked how Farid even knew about Karim. Rashid's face tightened as he explained that he had kept the baby's existence hidden from everyone except his closest people, because a child was vulnerability in his world. He told me about Yasmin, the woman he loved who disappeared 8 months ago while pregnant. He had believed she left him because she wanted a life away from his wealth and the dangers it brought. Now he feared she had been taken by Farid, held until she gave birth, and then killed. The casual way he discussed murder made me feel sick, but I forced myself to listen because I needed to understand what I had stumbled into. That night, Rashid came to my door near midnight carrying Karim, who was crying, and the powerful, dangerous man looked so lost holding his sobbing son that something in my chest cracked open. I showed him how to warm the bottle properly, how to test the temperature, and he learned with the same intense focus I imagined he brought to billion-dollar negotiations. Days fell into unexpected rhythm. Mornings feeding Karim while Rashid disappeared into his office. Afternoons when I would find him in the nursery trying to soothe his crying son with awkward tenderness. Evenings when we maintained careful distance like strangers forced together. I saw two versions of Rashid existing in the same body, the cold authority who commanded his people with sharp efficiency, and the uncertain father who stood at the nursery door past midnight, watching me rock Karim to sleep as if memorizing something precious he might lose. On the 4th day, Omar arrived with news that made Rashid's face turn to stone. They found Yasmin's body in an abandoned warehouse, dead for at least a month, killed by a single gunshot. Omar delivered the information with professional detachment, and I watched Rashid receive it with a stillness that was worse than any visible reaction. That night, I put Karim down in the nursery Rashid had created with desperate efficiency, every expensive item a baby could need. Rashid appeared near midnight and looked at his sleeping son with such raw pain I could barely breathe. He said Yasmin's name like a prayer and told me he failed to protect her because he did not know she was in danger. I crossed the space between us and said I was sorry. He looked at me like I had offered something vital and promised Karim would never suffer because of who his father was. I saw the man beneath the power. I admitted I was frightened of this world, but found myself not frightened of him, and something shifted between us, a connection forming over a sleeping child. The days blurred together, time measured by Karim's needs, and the moments when Rashid appeared to watch us with an expression I could not decipher. The tension between us stretched tighter, something unspoken building in the spaces where we carefully did not touch. On the 7th morning, Omar arrived with a photograph. My gallery in afternoon light, me visible through the window, and drawn over my face in red marker, was a target. My hands shook so badly Rashid took Karim before I could drop him. I said I needed to leave, return to my apartment. Rashid turned his fury on me and said I was not leaving this estate until Farid was eliminated. We stood there breathing hard, faces inches apart, and I felt the pull between us like a physical force. Hours later, Rashid left with Omar to pursue Farid's operations, and I waited in agony until he returned near midnight with split knuckles and something wild in his eyes. I cleaned the blood from his hands, and when I looked up, our faces were too close. He asked if I was afraid of him now. I should have said yes. Instead, I leaned into his touch and admitted I should be terrified, but I was not. He kissed me with a desperation that stole my breath, and I kissed him back despite every logical reason this was wrong. Kareem's cry from the nursery broke through the moment like cold water, and we separated abruptly. I fled to soothe the baby while my mind spun, trying to process what had happened and why I had kissed him back like I was starving. Morning brought Rashid's attorney with devastating news. Fareed had obtained evidence of illegal business dealings spanning years, proof that would guarantee prison if it reached authorities. Fareed's terms were delivered through intermediaries. Rashid would surrender all holdings and leave Dubai permanently, or the evidence would be handed to prosecutors within 48 hours. I watched Rashid process this impossible choice with frightening stillness, trapped between protecting his son and surrendering everything he built. That night, gunfire erupted through the estate. I ran to the nursery where Kareem was screaming and Omar appeared with guards, pushing us into a reinforced bunker beneath the house. Rashid appeared at the stairs with blood on his face and fury in every line of his body, and the moment he saw us alive, something shifted from rage to desperate relief. He held us both against his chest while his heart hammered and the door sealed against the sounds of battle above. When the attack ended near dawn with Fareed's men dead or captured, Rashid made his decision. He would send Kareem and me away to a secure location while he ended this war with Fareed permanently. I wanted to argue, but looking at Kareem sleeping peacefully, I knew he was right. That night, Rashid came to the nursery near midnight and asked if we could talk, really talk. He told me about his childhood in poverty, how he built his empire through intelligence and ruthlessness, how he never expected to care for anyone until Yasmin, and now there was Kareem, and impossibly, there was me. I found myself sharing my own loneliness, how I had been sleepwalking through existence until a baby in a basket woke me to terror and purpose. He asked what I wanted from him, and I answered truthfully that I did not know, because he could not promise safety or normalcy. He said he knew, and that was why he was sending me away. But his hand came up to cup my face, and he admitted in a voice rough with need that he would fight to build a world where Kareem could grow up safe. I turned my face into his palm and told him I had stopped wanting normal the moment I chose to stay. Something broke in his expression, and he kissed me with desperate intensity. When he stood and offered his hand, I took it and let him lead me to my room, where we came together with a tenderness that felt like sealing a vow. Morning came with Rashid already gone, and when I brought Kareem downstairs, I found him issuing final instructions with controlled intensity. He looked at me once with naked longing, then took Kareem and held his son for a long moment before handing him back without meeting my eyes. The safe house was in the mountains 2 hours north, so isolated I could not see another structure. The first 2 days passed with brief calls from Omar reporting that Rashid was moving against Fareed's operations. On the third day, the calls stopped. I waited through afternoon fighting rising panic, and when evening came with no word, I confronted the head guard and demanded information. He had none. On the fourth day of silence, I called Rashid's attorney with a stolen phone and learned the truth. Rashid had been captured during a raid, and Fareed was using him as bait. I understood that I was a weapon none of Rashid's men could wield. Fareed wanted to destroy everything Rashid loved, which made me valuable. I recorded a message for Kareem in case I did not return, then convinced the guard to drive me back with a fabricated story about Rashid's orders. Omar was furious when I found him, but I laid out my plan. I would offer information about Kareem's location in exchange for Rashid's life, getting close to Fareed in a way armed soldiers could not. Omar argued it was insane, but he had no better options. They fitted me with a wire and tracking device, and I walked into Fareed's nightclub with my heart hammering. His guards led me to a private office where Fareed sat like a king, older than Rashid, with cold eyes that assessed me like an insect. He said my name like greeting an old friend and told me I was the final piece he needed to break Rashid completely. I told him information about Kareem was hidden in a safe deposit box with instructions to deliver it to authorities if I did not check in every 12 hours. He smiled that terrible smile and ordered Rashid brought up from holding cells. When they dragged him in, bruised and bloodied, and his eyes landed on me, they went wide with shock and terror. Fareed gestured for guards to force Rashid into a chair across from me, and Rashid said in a voice rough with damage that Fareed should let me go because I meant nothing to him. Farid laughed with genuine delight. I met Rashid's eyes and tried to communicate that he needed to trust me, that I had a plan. I saw the moment he understood because something shifted in his expression from desperation to cold calculation. Farid proposed his terms with the air of generous mercy. Rashid would sign over everything and leave Dubai immediately with nothing. In exchange, we would both live long enough to reach the airport. Rashid said in a flat voice that he would never give Farid everything he built, and if we were going to die anyway, he preferred it be while spitting in Farid's face. Farid's smile faded into something cold and ugly as he told his guards to hurt me until Rashid reconsidered. One moved toward me with his hand raised, and I braced for impact while counting seconds, because Omar had promised 90 seconds from entry. The guard's hand never landed because the building exploded with gunfire and shouting, and Omar and his men poured through the shattered doorway. Rashid moved faster than should have been possible as he broke free and took down his guards, while I threw myself sideways as bullets filled the room. Everything happened in fragmented chaos until Omar secured the building and we ran through corridors filled with smoke. Rashid carried me to the waiting vehicles, and neither of us spoke during the drive to the backup safe house. Inside, Rashid turned on me with fury blazing, demanding to know what I was thinking walking into that stronghold. I shouted back that he was going to die in that cell, and I refused to hide while he was killed. Our voices escalated until we were chest to chest, and the fury transformed into desperate hunger. He grabbed my face and kissed me with consuming need, and I responded just as fiercely because we were both alive against impossible odds. When he wrenched back, he said in a voice scraped raw that I could not be part of this life because tonight proved how easily I could be destroyed. I refused to accept his protection as a cage. I told him I chose this and chose him, and he did not get to make that decision for me. He argued he could not lose me the way he lost Yasmin. I stepped close and told him hiding me had already failed, and I would not live half a life ruled by fear. He closed his eyes like the words caused physical pain, and when he opened them, they held raw vulnerability as he admitted he loved me and could not survive watching me die. I told him I loved him too, and that meant facing danger together. We spent the rest of the night planning Farid's end, and Rashid said he had been considering transitioning his empire toward legitimate operations for Kareem's sake. I offered to walk that road beside him if he would let me, and he pulled me close and agreed. The final confrontation happened 48 hours later when Omar delivered intelligence about Farid's location. Rashid mobilized his forces with lethal precision, and I insisted on being present. He gave me a look of frustration and resignation, understanding I would not be left behind. Rashid offered Farid one final negotiation by phone. Leave Dubai permanently with money to start over, or die tonight. Farid refused, arrogant in his fortifications. The assault was brutal and efficient, lasting less than 30 minutes before Omar reported Farid captured alive. Rashid entered the warehouse alone with Omar, and when he emerged 20 minutes later with blood on his hands, something settled in his expression that had been absent since this began. Farid had chosen exile over death, and the threat finally ended. We returned immediately to the safe house where Kareem waited, and when I held him again, I wept with relief. Rashid arrived hours later, and for the first time since I found Kareem in a basket, we were together as something resembling a family without immediate threat hanging over us. 6 months passed like water smoothing sharp edges. I reopened the gallery with security upgrades that Layla noticed but did not question. Most nights I stayed at the estate with Rashid and Kareem, but I kept my apartment because I needed that independence, and Rashid understood. Kareem thrived, growing from tiny infant into a baby who smiled and laughed and reached for us with recognition. Rashid gradually transitioned his empire toward legitimate operations through careful, legal moves, converting questionable holdings into proper businesses. Some of his organization left, but others welcomed the shift. Our relationship deepened through small domestic rituals that felt more intimate than danger. Shared meals where Kareem threw food and we laughed. Bedtime routines where Rashid sang Arabic lullabies. Quiet conversations where we talked about futures we were building. Rashid proposed on a Tuesday evening in May while I rocked Kareem to sleep. No grand gesture, just him watching us with tender expression before asking if I would marry him. I said yes without hesitation, and the ring he slipped onto my finger was simple platinum that felt right. I understood our life would never be completely safe because Rashid's past could not be erased, but we had chosen each other knowing the cost, and I would pay it again without regret. Sometimes I thought about that scorching August afternoon when I found a baby in a basket outside my gallery, and how that single moment rewrote my entire existence, leading me to a love I never imagined and a strength I did not know I possessed. I watched Rashid hold Kareem against his shoulder while they both looked at me with identical brown eyes and knew I was exactly where I belonged.